Okay, good evening, class. I would want to thank you very much for kindly being very understanding. Today, we would want to cover our chapter 8, which is going to be our last chapter that you are going to cover. Then we go back to revising, we go back to doing our onlines during our class. So by end of this class, we want to cover malicious software and the malware analysis. Basically, malware is the same as malicious software. By end of this class, we will describe the three broad mechanisms of malware that are used to propagate. Of course, we shall define it, but we'll see what are the three main ways in which some of these different viruses, worms, Trojan horses, that is the malware. How do they usually move from one place to another? That's what propagating means, and even being able to move along the internet. We'll understand the basics operation. How does a virus operate, a worm, and Trojan horse? We'll be able to describe the four broad categories of malware payload. We'll understand the different threats posed by bots. Bots are the same as zombies. Bots, then spyware, as well as the rootkits. These are the basic key core threats. Then we want to describe some malware countermeasure elements. We'll describe three locations that are usually three locations for malware detection mechanisms. Then finally, we look at the two types of malware analysis techniques. Basically, by the time you look through this course outline, you can already see questions that must come, whether in section A or in section B, in describing malware, looking at types of malware analysis, using examples, and we shall see some tools. We've already covered some of these tools, like regshot, and even the hash value to help us to check the SHA and the MD5. These are what we use to do malware analysis. We will be able to see examples of those that are static and dynamic, and we go a little more in detail in explaining the back end and how they do work. So we want to first of all start by defining what is a malicious software, or what is malware. Malware is a program that is inserted into a system, usually covertly, with the intent of compromising the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of the victim's data, the applications, or even operating systems, or otherwise annoying or disrupting the victim. Very important key things here we want to see. Malware is never sent with good intentions. No, malicious software is sent with intentions for destruction. People send viruses, people send Trojan horses, people send all kinds of nasty emails with an aim of making money, with an aim of cutting off the resources. And what are these resources? They may include data, the applications, as well as the operating systems, just to annoy and disrupt you from your day-to-day activities. So every time we look at malware, it's any of those bad viruses. There's no good virus. It always has an intention. And their aim is always to destroy and to disturb an organization's work and exhaust the resources. So malicious software contains programs that exploit system vulnerabilities. You can look at them as also system vulnerabilities in terms of those that exhaust and finish up the resources that are available to be used by the different sets of users. Malware is also known as malicious software. That's what it is in full. It contains program fragments that need a host program. In terms of they can't stand on themselves. You need something to trigger them. That's why they come mainly as emails. They come as viruses. They come through the back doors. They come as logic bombs. They come as small fragments. You see people telling you, install this free program, not knowing it's coming with some malicious software. So be very, I know we're using a lot of free software, but immediately we are done with that, it's very important that we get rid of it, because it may actually sit there and start collecting a host of different problems. One thing we've also seen is that this malware is usually independent and self-contained programs. For example, the worms and the bots, they replicate themselves a lot, and they're sophisticated, and they focus on threatening the computer systems, whether it is the hardware, whether it's the software, or even its resources. Its aim is to exhaust them, such that when you come to see what is available for use, you don't have much, and you find your computer is hanging, your computer is slow, it's not functioning well. Many times that means there's some malicious software that is causing it to exhaust its resources. We want to define quite a number of terms here of malware. We want to look at a virus. How do we define a virus? A virus is one of the malicious softwares that attaches itself to a program. It can't work on its own. It can't work on its own. It must attach itself to a particular program to see how it can be able to propagate or to move from one place to another. Worms copy themselves onto, or they propagate copies of itself onto other computers. While logic bombs help in exploding when a particular condition occurs, one may come up with a logical bomb telling you that if this is this, then this is the other. Unless, I'll give an example. Someone may be malicious in a system, a payment system, and say if particular people are missing on a payroll, then it will not make any payments to the people in that department or people in that institution for as long as particular names are missing. So that is a condition it will have set. If this is not there, then do not proceed ahead. So that is an example of a logical bomb. You set some conditions that must be completed. Then we have a Trojan horse. A Trojan horse fakes, let me quickly see through. Okay, Apollo is inquiring, propagating and replicating, are they the same thing? Yes, they're exactly the same things. Propagating is being able to move, and we will be able to look at even the life cycle. There is a life cycle of we have a particular life cycle that we shall look at of a virus. How does it, it's just like, the life cycle we have for a butterfly. It comes from the egg to the pupa to the larva, then it goes to a butterfly. It goes through stages of development. We will look at it for that of a virus. So propagation, how does it move? How does it spread from one place? You develop it here in Uganda, but how does it reach different countries? How does it find its way to Kenya, find its way to the US, find its way to Vietnam? How does it move? That is the propagation, which is the same as what you're inquiring of. Okay, So here we are just defining basic definitions of the different types of malicious software. We have the backdoor. Backdoors or tap doors, these are entry points. These are weak points that we find in any kind of network on systems that are left open. These allow unauthorized access to the functionality. It's like if you get to your house and you sleep in the house and leave the windows open, you can totally know that thieves will come because you'll have left something open. You leave the doors open, you leave the ventilators open. Those are the weak points that software explores to see how it can maximize its entry into a system. We also have some malicious code known as mobile code. These usually move unchanged in different platforms. That's why we call them heterogeneous platforms. If they're homogeneous, meaning that these ones only work maybe like on Windows, but there are some that move from different applications. They move in different, they move to phones, they are mobile code. And of course, their aim is not to do good, is to pick information, is to send it somewhere. That is what mobile code aims at doing. Then we have the auto router kits. Auto router kits are virus generators. They help in generating malicious code to see how they can quickly multiply them, propagate them, and spread them to different places. We have different spammers and fladder programs. These are large volumes of unwanted packets. An example, check your email. When you go under your folder of spam, you will see all kinds of adverts, all strange kinds of adverts. That is part of spam. And they are flooding and sending you lots of unnecessary adverts, necessary, unnecessary information, that sometimes some good information can actually get lost in there. So once in a while you check before you quickly scan through. Don't be in a hurry to download any of that or attachments, and you find that that is it. They quickly exhaust your mailbox. Then we have keyloggers. Keyloggers are hardware or software that are installed or attached to your hardware device or computer with an aim of capturing our keystrokes. The key focus is on seeing that they capture how you type, the different keys that you commonly use, and thereafter it will use them, it will send these keys to the owners and tell you, the most common keys are ABCD or XYZ or FGK, and that will help them to come up with all forms of links to come up with passwords of what you commonly use, such that next time they want to carry out an attack, they have a clear clue of what keys they are actually using. We then have our rootkits. Rootkits are sophisticated. We had seen the auto rootkit, those ones generate. Rootkits are sophisticated hacker tools that gain root level access. I don't know if you've seen the root. When you click and you go to the root, you basically have access to the entire system. It's just like when you click my computer, that is the root. You're able to see all the programs, you see all the storage places, you see my documents, you see all, that is the root. So rootkits are sophisticated tools that allow these attackers to have access to the root level of the computer, meaning that they can access anything on any computer anytime. We have the zombies. Zombies are also known as bots. These are used in distributed denial of services or even denial of services. These are software on infected computers that launch attacks on other computers. So they're more or less like intermediaries. They're intermediaries that go through different sets of computers to make an attack to a particular group of people that it's targeting. We have some more terms here we need to understand well. What is payload? You know, a virus carries something it needs to execute. And what it carries is what we term as payload. It is the action that it carries of a particular malware. If it's carrying malware to go and pick usernames and passwords, then that is the actual action of that virus, and that of not a virus only, but any kind of malware. And which I told you we shall take you through the life cycle. It only has 4 steps. One of them is where it releases the payload. It releases the action. Once it has released or it has completed the condition to what it wanted to do, then it releases it. It carries out its attack. We have crimeware. Crimeware, we say these are kits that help in building malware. Yes, we'll give an example like those that people want to build to carry out attacks on Russia. All these are crimeware. These are kits used to build malware that include propagation and payload mechanisms. Here are some examples of the tools. We have Zeus, we have Sakura, Black Hole, Phoenix. These are just only a few of them, but there are so many. Every other day, different people are coming up with all kinds of crimeware. If you want to read more about that, you can always check more over the internet on all kinds of crimeware. We also have what we term as the advanced persistent threats. There are some threats that do not give up. They are consistent. One, they're sophisticated. That's why we call them the advanced. Persistent meaning that they attack over an extended period of time. They will take their time. Of course, we say the one starts by being a passive attacker. You just sniff. You want to just track the traffic to find out what happens here, what is happening by doing some quick network analysis. Then after you've taken some time to understand, okay, so this is the route in which money is transacted between so and so and so and so, then that gives them a loophole, a gap to show exactly that, yes, these are the ones that they use and these are the steps available to carry out particular attacks. It's like before they go to actually attack a particular home, they take time to study it. They follow through. There is a pattern. There is a pattern. They are persistent. They will take their time at the right time, whether it's after 3 months or 6 months or 1 year. It's when they'll carry out an attack. So they are persistent. They start slowly. Attackers never just attack once and that is it. No, they have taken time to build. They take time to build through their intention. That's why we term it as persistent. And of course, it's a threat. It's not coming with good news. No, they have selected targets. That's why we term them as threats. So these advanced persistent threats, these are selected targets, capable or well-funded attackers. Their aim is that they want to be able to target either a bank or a particular individual or a particular institution. They want to attack, give an example of the way they attacked Facebook.
I have tests. Actually, I have a test and it's in the.
Okay, please kindly keep yourselves muted. I think I better get to the security and okay, so these are some other terms that we would want to know. As we've seen this advanced persistent threats. They'd never give up, and that's why you see hackers take time to keep planning to see who their next victim is. So we want to look at the most commonly known threats or vulnerabilities. One are the viruses. A virus is a piece of software that infects programs, modifies them to include a copy of the virus. So it executes secretly when the host program is run. Give an example, it can attach itself to Microsoft Word. Every time you open it, it executes automatically and gives you errors. You can't use Word, you can't read your documents. That is an example of a virus, and it will keep giving you errors and errors and errors. It's very specific. There are those which are specific to operating systems as well as hardware. They take advantage of the details as well as the weaknesses, the points of entry, as we had seen. So these are the 4 phases that a virus undergoes. Remember how we said, like before we get to a butterfly, we go through phases. 1, we have the dormant phase. Here, the virus is idle. It is just sleeping, it's resting. It goes to the 2nd phase. By the way, we usually ask you to describe these phases. In the propagation phase, it now starts moving. It's active, it's more or less like at the larva function. The idle phase is more or less like at the egg level. Then the propagation phase is at the larva, either like at caterpillar form when it is able to start moving from place to place to place. Then the triggering phase is more or less like the pupa, where it's activated to perform the actions. Then finally is the execution. By the time it executes, that's at the butterfly phase. Now the function is actually performed. Is it going to delete particular programs? Is it stealing some money? Is it removing some zeros? Is it transferring items from here to there? Is it changing marks in a database? That kind of virus will now carry out its actual function within the execution phase. So these are the 4 phases of the life cycle of a virus. Viruses have different components. We have the infection mechanisms. These are the ways in which it can propagate or replicate. They're exactly the same. How can they move from one place to another? Because they aim at making themselves and transmitting from one place to another. Those are the infection mechanisms. Then, of course, we say they have a trigger. In this trigger, there is something that needs to occur. An event must occur that makes that payload to be active. It's just like a gun. A gun has a trigger. However, it's not until it has found the target that it needs that someone presses the trigger. Then when you press the trigger, it's only when that malicious software goes out to do what it's supposed to do. So that gun is carrying a little bullet. That bullet is what we term as the payload. And this payload is the one that contains either the acid or, I don't know, the gunpowder that is meant to go and destroy something in a particular place. Sometimes these viruses can be prepended. They can be prepended, that is added before code. They can be postpended after the code. Then they can also be embedded. They can be part of the actual code. So depending on where you decide to attach the virus, and that's why we shall look at one of the slides shortly that gives us some very short code that helps us to analyze how one can write a virus. So when infected programs are invoked, then they execute this virus code, then the original program will be able to run. So what are we saying? It attaches itself, as we said, to a program. However, it waits for a particular event, and we shall look at it. Once that event is fulfilled, then it's able to set off its trigger, and it sets off this code to tell it to do what it's supposed to do. It will now release that payload. It will release those little small devils that are supposed to do whatever destruction that is supposed to be done. And it has to be well defined. Is it editing? Is it deleting? Is it changing something? Is it formatting a hard drive? That is the payload, the action that this virus is supposed to do. It can block the initial infection. It can block the initial infection or make it difficult, or to propagate with access controls. And that's why they're saying, access controls are one of the ways of resisting or of taming these viruses. By access control, we give different users different usernames and their passwords. And we give you different access levels that, okay, you have access to a bank. However, you're not a bank manager. I'm just only a client. I cannot log in as a teller to start entering money. No, as a client, I can only view, I can transfer money from one place to another, make some basic payments, check my balance. There are basics that I can do, but I can't go and giving myself credit. That is access level controls. It's just like if it's an academic system. In that system, we have the students. The activities the students are able to carry out are different from those of a lecturer, different from the HOD. So that is what we would term as access control. So if you have a system and you have installed clear access control rights, people know what they do, what is the hierarchy, who is allowed to install any program on a machine. It's not everyone. That's why there is someone who is always known as the administrator. You don't give administrative rights to everyone. There are some who you just leave and say, your owner just to read, not to write, not to install. You limit. Those are the access control rights that want to make it difficult for someone to install different viruses. Okay, Simon is inquiring, which chapter is this? This is chapter 8. Chapter 8, we're looking at malware analysis. This is an illustration of the virus. This is a program of a virus. So they're calling it program V, presenting a virus. Okay, so let's just take time to understand this code. Go to main, look out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is our target. Our subroute is to infect executable. Then we have a loop. In a loop, we are saying if our file is to go and get any random executable files, you know the files that have .exe, those are executable files. That's in our loop. If the first line of the code, because remember our target is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If the first line of the code file has this same number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then go to the loop and prepend to it this virus to this file. Prepend V to that file. Because remember we said a virus always attaches itself. It's either postpends itself, it prepends itself, or it embeds itself. Those are the 3 ways in which it propagates and hides itself to make itself active. So you've given it some conditions. You're telling it that, yes, we are interested in this is the particular target. So just go looking for particular lines that we are so sure there is a file whose first line is equivalent to this. Moment you find it, please attach yourself there. You're in the right place. What is our subroutine is to do particular damage. Whatever damage is to be done, that is just a comment there on what it's supposed to do. The subroutine is now in the trigger that is pulled. Return true if any condition holds. And what is that condition? Our condition of that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Otherwise, go to the main program, and have our infect that executable. If the trigger is pulled, then do damage. Go to the next and keep on searching. So this is a small set of program that someone was writing. It is standard code that's available in textbooks over the net. Standard code that looks at what a virus is. Apollo is inquiring, what is prepending? Prepending is to attach before, go and attach yourself to it. So before it runs or before it's executed, please go and carry out this damage. Either, and the damage you can choose, it's up to you to tell it what do damage is. Damage can be defined as maybe go and delete or go and format that particular program. So that is, so if you prepend it, that means you want it to come before attach it. Postpend, after we have left, please leave them with some little more devils. Embedding, it is part of that program. So we've said for viruses, many times they always prepend them because they can't run on their own from the way we've seen, the way they work. They need to be attached to a particular program. And of course, you need to have a particular target that you're interested in. There are different forms of viruses. We can have compressed viruses. In this kind of compressed virus, they're giving us an example of a program that is running on a curriculum vitae, a CV. And they're looking for a CV. And of course, someone has gone there and they know at least there are some keywords that it's supposed to have. That is the 0, 1, 2 up to 7. So there's a program CV. Go to main. And of course, you're looking for 1, 0 up to 7. The subroutine is to infect this executable. Our loop opens. If the file gets any random executable file, and that's why you take time, every time you see .exe files, not all of them are safe. You need to know what are they meant to do. Some of them are just waiting to carry out some work. That's why I was telling you, installing, downloading all kinds of games, for example, they'll always have to install and they leave for you lots of unknown EXEs. Those are entry points for viruses. And they will take some time before they search through your computer to carry out some damage. Caroline, our test is not on Friday, please. We'll agree on a suitable time. In our main program, if we ask for permission, then we infect that executable. And of course, here we're telling it, oh, let's first look at the first line here. Our subroutine for the infected, let me first show us where, let me quickly annotate to show where we are. Yes, we are just still here. We have seen that this is our target. This target is what we are looking out for in our file, and our file is very specific. It's in a CV file. So we're telling it, if it picks out this word that has 0, 1, 2, that means someone went and just typed it there, just for it to alert itself. Go and get this random executable file. If the first line of the file is equal to that 0 up to 7, go to the loop and compress this file. Prepend the CV to that file. In the main program, if we ask for permission, then we're able to now infect our executable and compress the rest of the file, then run our compressed file. So you find that they're all forms and kinds of files that one would want to have. Yeah, you're asking if you can run the code practically. You can be able to run it on different programs. We've said that there are different kinds of crimeware that help people in programming and coming up with this software, but that will be at your own interest. We will not go into the coding of what? Of viruses. So, but at least we need to know that yes, they are there. And even when we do visit Anita, you'll still see, they'll show you how they handle the malware analysis, they track the malware analysis and carry out alerts of malware analysis within their network. And that is something that we need to have all kinds of programs as IT experts that help us in tracking this common malware. Okay. We classify viruses into different types. We have two main ways of classifying our viruses. And by the way, we always ask you, list the two major types of classifications of viruses. One is by target, two is by concealment. By target, we can have we have 4 different types of viruses. By concealment, we also have 4 types of viruses. So we need to know what type of virus is one dealing with. If you can be able to identify it, then that means you are on the way to finding a solution for it. We have boot sector viruses. These ones target the master boot. They aim at targeting the operating, the boot system, that's the operating system of a computer. We have file infectors. Remember, these are target viruses. The file infectors infect executable operating system files, particular files that they're interested in. So depending on the type of virus, we have the macroviruses. Macroviruses infect files that are to be used by an application. We have multiparity viruses. Multiparity viruses infect in multiple ways. They're not limited only maybe boot sector, macro. No, they will affect in all different ways. They can affect the operating system, they can affect the master boot, they can affect all kinds of ways. Deleting, that's why they call them multiparity viruses. And multiparity viruses, by the way, are quite very difficult to be dealt with. They keep changing, they keep mutating in different forms. We have concealments. By concealment, in terms of they can easily hide themselves. They quickly hide themselves, they encrypt themselves, they make themselves very difficult to ever leave. They always, the time you get it, you find, oh, it has encrypted itself, it has changed, it has, that's why we see we have these very stubborn 4 types of viruses. One, we have the encrypted viruses. These are, of course, encrypted, they are hidden. They have keys stored, the key is stored inside the virus. So it is hard for you to even pick it. That means you will need to have some serious forensic tools to, first of all, decrypt it, to read and pick this virus, then get the key. Then that is when you can now be able to know what it's made up of, go and get the appropriate antidote, run it on your computer, and out it goes. We have stealth viruses. Stealth viruses, these are those that hide themselves. Those are the compressed viruses. They keep hiding themselves from one place to another. Those are stealth viruses. And we shall see that we shall need a very tough way of picking them because they are always hiding. We have polymorphic viruses. Polymorphic viruses recreate themselves with different signatures. You know, like what polymorphism is? It just keeps on moving from one form to another to another. They keep changing their signature because they are identified by the kind of signature they have. And of course, you know, viruses, antiviruses are made up of their different signatures. Look at the way we had COVID. COVID is a virus, yet they had to be able to decode it to find out what is its signature to get the antidote. In its signature, it was dealing with the DNA and the RNA. and mutating it in within the body to go and affect the body. That's why you see the medicines they had to use where people were worried that, oh, it is changing DNA, I don't know, because it affects the DNA and keeps mutating it to different forms. That it was a polymorphic virus. Metamorphic viruses recreate themselves from different signature and different behavior. By the way, even COVID went to a level, it came from being polymorphic, it went to being also metamorphic. It reached a point and it was changing from alpha to beta to I don't know what, to, oh, it kept changing to flora something, to, they gave it all kinds of names. They get one virus, and that's why they had to first of all seek out a range of viruses. At one point, people were worried that, oh, this antivirus, the vaccine they had given us, that's more or less like an antivirus. In it, it was to only kill some particular viruses, not particular strains. Later, they found that no, they all have the same behavior. So it was easier for them to pick up these signatures and deal with their behavior. So these are very tough viruses that are concealed. And these concealed viruses are very difficult to always get rid of in within a system. Macro and scripting viruses. These macros became very common in the 1990s, the mid-1990s, 1995, since they were platform independent in terms of they could exist in different media, different programs. They were platform independent, they were unique. Their aim was to infect documents, and they were very easy to spread. They exploited the macro capabilities, especially of Microsoft Office. That is Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I'm telling you, during that time, it was very tough. And of course, once they embedded themselves onto your Word document, that is it. You have whether your flash disk, or by that time they were using diskettes, then you on tape drives, you would find that once it attacks on one computer, it executes all Word documents. I don't know if you've seen some of those viruses. Those were attacking the macros of the operating system of the programs. More recent releases, of course, were made and came about. However, we now realize that all of these signatures were now put in within the antivirus programs. It's just like the way we do have our vaccine. They get the different strains. Any new strain, they add it inside there. So every time they come up with a new version of an antivirus or a vaccine for us to use, the inside there, they have put the different signatures. And that's why they tell us to deal with this malware, you need to always update your systems. Make sure you upgrade them every time. Okay. Last semester, we were told that macro viruses affect macro systems. Exactly. Peterson, you're spot on. But where are those macro systems? These ones are in Microsoft Office. Like in Word, you can go and enable macros. You can enable macros in Word, in Excel, PowerPoint, all those in Microsoft Office. So those macro viruses go and attach themselves onto that macro component. That's what we are trying to mean. And of course, they carry out the execution. That is it. Okay, but they've said that at least antiviruses now are able to deal with several of these macro and scripting viruses. Lots of email viruses. By the way, these are one of the most common threats that we receive here as a country. Most of them come by email. And you'll find that in any organization you'll be working with, you're always fighting with people who tell you, oh, I opened my email, someone sent me this, on opening it, oh, it just brought some few lines of codes and that was it. You're so sure those are viruses. One of the most common viruses that are known through emails was called Melissa. Melissa was worked upon, by the way, in an institution. It was It's a PhD student actually who came up with it, and it carried out and shut down several systems in California. So it exploits the MS macros, MS Word macros, and it attaches itself to it. If the attachment is opened, then the macro is now activated, and it will quickly send an email to all users in your address book. And of course, the moment that they open that email, that is it. It keeps multiplying that way. Melissa was just doing her work, just trying out her own programs. And I'm telling you, that's how she came up with it. But later on, by the way, the police traced her, FBI traced her, and they locked her up for a while, and they later released her because she had to come up with an antidote for it and make it available. So different people come up with all sorts of viruses for different reasons. It can be for fame. It can be for money. It can be, like this one was mainly done just for fame. It can be done for maliciousness, to be able to just pull down the entire network or the entire system. Countermeasures, how do we deal with these viruses? Prevention is always better than cure. The ideal solution, but what is difficult, is to try and prevent. But how can you prevent it? Make sure you have your up-to-date antiviruses. Make sure that you're always running them. Make sure that you carry out awareness and training to the users. Realistically, what is needed is that you would need to carry out detection. How do you detect that even a virus came and visited? You slept, you woke up, the devil came in and sowed some seeds. How? We will be able to see in the dynamic and static ways. And of course, we already began by looking at that tool. And here we shall see it. It's called RegShot. We use RegShot to, before you leave your workplace at night, take one shot of what you have on your system and your whole network, save it by the date, leave it. Come in the morning, run the next shot and compare. The moment you compare them and you get something different, then you're so sure that, aha, I've been able to detect that. Some devils did something. They picked something. They came and planted something, and it will actually bring them to you a whole list, and you should be able to know how do you handle them. So identification, detection is good. Then identifying that specific virus, being able to remove all traces of it, either it's deleting it or it's going and looking for those lines of code where you're telling it, go do damage. You just make them, there are some pieces of code when you run them in a safe environment, you're able to open it. That's why they tell you, when you find a virus on a computer, first of all, isolate it, put it aside, get it off the network, just to make sure it stops propagating or sending it or multiplying it, replicating itself over the internet. Get it off the internet and do its cleanup alone using the forensic tools. Track and trace it, read its code very well. Go and append, or even go and make those, you know how you have a program and you make those dangerous parts as comments? That is it. Some viruses will not go. You just have to open them and deactivate exactly where the bomb is, where that logic bomb is, where that trigger is, where it's telling it, look for this line. When you find it, go and do this damage, delete it, execute it. That is how you deal with the countermeasures of some of these tough viruses. Antiviruses are very key in dealing with them. And antiviruses have evolved over the several years. So the virus and antivirus technologies have both evolved over years. And so we want to look at the different sets of generations. The early viruses were just simple code that was easily removed. But over time now, the code has become very complex for one to easily be, for it to be detected. And so did the countermeasures. If before it was very easy to open it and append oneself to it, that made it quite very easy. but now it's becoming difficult and more complex as the days go by. We have different forms or evolutions. How have they mutated and moved on? The early days, we used to have the viruses were known as first generation viruses. These first generation viruses just only used to use signature patterns. These signature scanners, you just scan and you quickly get your bit patterns that were all the same, pick it and delete it. Those were the very initial antiviruses. They later moved on and found that no, the viruses have now become very tough. They moved on to getting our second generation of viruses. And this second form of generation of viruses were the heuristics, which were now dealing with the integrity checks and dealing with the checksums. And we shall see some of these checksums, and that's how for heuristic checks, you're able to run, like for example, the hash value keys that we saw either in OS forensics or in any other software environment. Our third one is the identity. The third is identity action. Finding them by the kind of action they do. The moment they delete, then you know, okay. The moment they go to format, the moment they go hiding, the moment, that is how they kept changing. And we shall see in that third type is where we had the metamorphic one, those stealth ones, that they just pick them and identify them by what they do. Then we have the fourth one, which is a combination. And we'll see in the fourth one, that's where we have those very tough viruses. Those very tough viruses that are polymorphic, those which are metamorphic, they just keep changing. That is the fourth generation of viruses. And that is where we currently are and are stuck in those generations of viruses. We have a general decryptor or a general decryption, from encryption to decryption, that helps us in scanning these patterns of our viruses, just to make sure we pick up the signatures. Many times we advise to run executable files, usually through a GD scanner. This GD scanner, GD stands for generic decryption, a generic decryption scanner. What does it entail? It's made up of a CPU emulator to interpret the instructions of what the virus does. It's this virus scanner will check for the known virus signature. For example, is it called Melissa? What is it called? That is, it will run it and scan it. Then we now go to the emulation. It will emulate the controls or modules to manage the process. Before they go to executing, you want to manage and understand what were the patterns like. You remember you first scanned it. Now you want to understand what is known signatures or what are the current signatures there. Try to emulate them, try to put them in a safe control environment to manage them so that they don't spread over the entire network. We let our virus decrypt itself in an interpreter. Then we keep on periodically scanning these virus signatures. So every time your scanner runs, every time your checksum runs, what are you doing? You are running to look out for any new virus scans, and it does it automatically. Usually either in the night, you set at a particular time for it to run itself, and it makes sure it keeps updated with any new signatures that that particular paid for virus, antivirus is using. If you're using McAfee, for example, every day, every other week, it will come up with new updates. So you should have your machine over the internet to get these updates. This deal with different scans. They let the virus to do work for they let the virus to do work for an antivirus program by exposing it in within a controlled environment such that it does not execute and delete the entire operating system or even go and change the environment in which it's working. So here is an illustration of a digitally immune system. In a digitally immune system, we want to follow the instructions. Of course, we have different users in different places. But what are they trying to show us? From the time, this is one where we're saying it's in an environment that has different machines that are able to carry out this scanning. We start with number one. Number one, we have, this is where our number one is. We have our number one here. So the virus infected client machine is identified by the administrative machine. Imagine you have different machines. These are different clients. This is like client A, this is client B, C, D over your network, and so many other machines. So the administrative machine will keep on scanning and looking, and it finds, we have found one machine that has been affected by a particular virus. Maybe someone received a card from a friend, opened it not knowing it was a virus, and it has run all over the entire network. So if the administrator can first of all pick it up, then the next thing, it will take it to the virus analyzing machine. This analyzing machine will analyze the behavior and the structure of this virus, of course, opening the code in a safe environment such that you don't want it to move on and spread to all others. So this administrator will now take it on to this virus scanning machine, analyze the virus and its behavior, extract the signatures, deprive it from prescription in terms of quickly give it an antidote so that it doesn't go and infect. It's just like the way a vaccine would work. It builds the immunity so that when a virus comes, it's able to go and engulf it, pick it, and destroy those little bits of the virus that come in. That is what this virus analysis machine does. Then, of course, number four, it will send a report back to the administrator that, we finished picking the description, we've removed the signatures, and the file is now clean. So number five, it will now alert the machine that, okay, yes, you infected us, you got this virus. And of course, all these messages are tracked on, all these messages are tracked and the processes are tracked on the administrative machine. And of course, number six, it will send a whole set of prescription to all the other machines. Say, please, we found a new virus. We've now got its new signature. Please go and pick its signatures. Go pick the signatures. Now you're immune. In case it comes, you can now be able to fight it. But it need only want, first of all, bring it. Once it comes to the analyzer, that is when now it is destroyed. They extract its signatures, get a prescription for it, like whatever antidote it is, whatever medicine it is. Then they send it all the others just to alert them to be sure that they also have attained immunity from this kind of viruses. So this is just a digitally immune system, basically trying to show us how a system can build its immunity when once a virus attacks through one machine to get into the others. We have behavior blockers, and that's why we shall see it's very important for us. Just a moment. That's why it's very important for us to always have all forms of antiviruses and even these behavior blockers. These behavior blockers work very well for those that have different patterns. You want to make sure that you pick this antivirus, these different pieces of code that are malicious, put them in a sandbox. Let us follow the process here. Number one, our administrator sets acceptable software behavior policies and uploads them onto a server. It gives us the do's and the don'ts. So these lists are sent out to all the different people, and of course, all the machines know what is accepted, what is not accepted. Number two, a virus comes through over the internet. Of course, it always bypasses and sifts its way through, masquerading either as an email or as an attachment. Somewhere it masquerades and finds its way through to the server. Now, as part of the server, what is installed there, what software is installed there, we have our sandbox. A sandbox, I'm just giving it to us as an illustration of our behavior blocker, because once the virus comes here on this server, it's through this sandbox that this behavior blocker will now be able to pick up all suspicious software and prevent them from proceeding. It's just like if a fire comes through and you find people are well armed with sand, they will pour sand on it, pour water on it, use fire extinguishers. If it's very small fire, they're able to contain it. That's what these sandboxes do. They just block the behavior of the system. And what kind of behavior is being monitored? Look at them here in red. Attempts to open, to view, to delete, to modify, attempts to format drives, modifications of logics, of executables, modifications of critical system settings, scripts of emails to send executable content. All these are examples of what behaviors different viruses come with. But they're saying that at the server end, once you install this sandbox, of course it's software, then you're so sure that it will pick them out and disarm this software very seriously. Number two, we have worms. The others are quite small and easy. It's the viruses that take longer to explain. In our worms, these replicate programs. We've seen worms replicate programs that propagate or move from place to place over the internet using emails, remote executables, or remote logins. They also have the same phases, just like the viruses. In the dormant phase, it's idle. Propagation phase, it's assembling its action. In the trigger, it identifies what it's supposed to do and release the payload. Finally, in the execution. The propagation phases search for other systems. They connect to it and copy themselves to it. That's what these worms do. They can disguise themselves as a system process. An example of what banners came up with in the shockwave rider. In Palo Alto labs in the 1980s, they came up with a worm. And I'm telling you, this shockwave rider was able to pull down several websites. Yahoo went down, CNN went down, and they made lots of losses. Every time your servers are down, people are making lots of losses. Another common example was the Morris worm. The Morris worm was developed, it's one of the most well-known worms. They were released by Robert Morris, and people usually give them signatures after their names. So maybe we may have a Mukwaya worm. I don't know, let me see from the students, a Noeline worm, a Juliet worm, and a Tim worm, you know. People come up with names of the viruses, basically for fame, just to know, do not forget. Please, in case you're coming to buy, drop some money on my side. And that's how these people who create viruses and worms come up with small monies that are paid for within the antiviruses. Because ask yourself, these antiviruses that we have and buy, where do they pick the signatures? They go and put in the antidotes. It's just like the way really COVID, I could not have a better explanation. People still believe that COVID was still made by these microbiologists and even pharmacists. And what was the focus? Their aim was to see how can they sell some of their drugs. And that's why this week and last week we're seeing WHO is fearing to declare that the world is no longer having the pandemic of COVID. They have just feared to say it, but they need to be bold and tell us the truth. When a virus has been weakened thoroughly, it's good to admit. So this Morris worm affected over 6,000 computers, and they caused a loss of up to they made tens to hundreds of millions of losses of dollars. They were mainly attacking Unix systems. Their focus was on cracking down password files, looking for passwords and being able to pick them up or delete them. So this bug was exploiting itself in the finger protocols. And this was being sent through bugs on emails. If one would succeed to have a remote shell access, then they would set up different bootstrap programs to copy these worms from one place to another. They're just giving us a propagation model. It's exactly, if you look at this model, it's not any different from what they would keep telling us the way the virus COVID was now moving through. And that's why they will tell you, it is soon reaching its peak. It has now killed several people now. It's soon flattening. Really, we are at the flattening top. The other day, we're checking, some hospitals have one patient of COVID. You hear from out of the blue somewhere, one person dies in a whole week. So really, the numbers have gone down. But it had to first go through this fast spreading phase. That's the same way it also does of viruses and worms in within any kind of system before finally it loses its energy and power once they get its antidote, and that is it. The linear rate of it now flattens and they have very little influence over killing of people or even infecting until another strain comes. But we pray that God will save us from all those strains and they don't come. There are other worms like the red code, and of course they don't work any different. Some of them are made for distributed denial of services, that is DDoS. Like the red code was made specifically for Microsoft, the ISS, that is, the ISS is the server for Microsoft, the Apache server. It was probing random IP addresses, and their focus was to deny and block them from having access to any facilities. They consume significant internet capacity when active. Over 360,000 servers were attacked in less than 14 hours. And of course, this code red 2 was another variant. You know how they keep coming up with different variants and moving on, mutating. There was the SQL Slammer that came in 2003, then My Doom in 2004 that multiplied and infected over hundreds of millions of messages in over 36 hours. Those are 1.5 days. And of course, these are usually sent over mail for remote access, backdoors. That's why you see, if one wants to block people from getting these servers, these viruses, and worms, one of the ways is to prevent people from accessing services remotely. However, during the COVID season, people had no choice. They're working from home. So they had no choice but to allow them to access these services remotely. So once you access them remotely, that means you need to put very stringent internet means of always tracking who are the users online. It's just like on Zooms, they were telling us many people were just sharing links to different students, and you would never know which students log in. You would be on some Zooms and you'd see all kinds of nasty messages going through. That means, oh, they linked it to different wrong groups. And that's why you see in some of the webinars now they had to get people to register so that they can follow through and see, okay, it's so-and-so who sent this kind of nasty message. Yes, Peterson is asking, do viruses replicate? Yes, they do. That's the only way they survive. They have to always attach themselves. They have to keep multiplying and moving through. That is it. It's just like the way, look at COVID as well. The way it was always moving from one person to another. I heard them saying, Annabella worm, definitely check and see. That one should already be there. Not mine. Those worms should already be there. Yes, it's just the way why people were putting on masks just to help those worms from replicating, from moving, propagating from one person to another, because those which are airborne were very dangerous. But for them, our own that we're studying about go over the internet. They need one email, they go pick all kinds of email addresses or phone numbers, send themselves to them. The state of worm technology, what did they do to deal with them? They came up with multi-platform, there are different multi-platform worms. There are multi-exploit worms. These multi-platform worms were not limited just to Windows, but they've got also Unix as well. Linux hardly attaches itself. Yes, Bavaria will be able to tell you once we have completed. I received a list of those students that have registered in groups of 12s, and we will be communicating accordingly. Yeah, madam, how far has the hacker gone? They have still not gone through many steps because they will track them down. Russia is very sophisticated. They're cracking down and even arresting them. So of course he says he's using lots of VPN, but I'll keep you posted. Yeah, and of course, the moment you get onto a secure network, by the way, they can pick you up. UCC has the powers to pick you up once they see that, yes, some attacks are coming. They can be able to pick you up and search for you based on your location. And straight to your house they come and they pick you up and hand you in. So you need to be very careful, especially if your aim is to target government, your aim is to target different governments. By the time you go into that phase, really, of one is totally very, very desperate, as we saw, because of the kinds of destruction that Ukraine is currently suffering. It's really hardly there. Okay, so just a moment. So we have different sets of worms, just as we saw different sets of viruses. There are the zero-day worms, the transport vehicle worms, which are mainly for the distributed denial of services. And these ones are mainly for the bots, because they want to move and send millions of packets. The metamorphic ones that change the form of appearance and behavior, polymorphic, the ultra fast speed. We had seen the multi-exploits and the multi-platform. So there are different forms of worms. And of course, they move on with a level of complexity depending on what they are meant to do. How do we countermeasure these worms? Again, we rely on the power of the antiviruses. The moment every antivirus, just like the way we're relying on the power of the vaccine, because in the vaccine, they were able to decode the DNA of COVID and all its different strains to see how they can compress it inside there to help in boosting our immunity. That's what these antiviruses equally do contain. The worms can cause significant net activities. And of course, it's the signatures that these antiviruses are able to contain. They filter, we have filter-based worms that we have worm defense approaches. One are based on the signature-based worms that you can scan and make filters of them. We have the filter-based worms that help in doing the containment, focusing on the kind of content. Then we had the payload classifications. We have the threshold random walk scan detections, and we have the rate limiting and rate halting. Basically, they limit any outgoing traffic when a threshold is met. And we know, why are we looking at this malware analysis? Malware analysis comes in handily. Malware analysis comes in handily when we are able to see how we use forensic tools to detect and also be able to see what are the appropriate ways in which we can handle them. That's why forensics comes in handily in managing these malware, viruses, worms of all kinds of sorts. Proactive worm containers, just like the way we had our sandbox for the viruses, same applies here to the server on the firewall. What do they attach? A worm management center. This worm management center, this one here that we see here, is an extra device just to help in sieving out the worms before they go out to the rest of the internet. So right from the internet, it comes, gets to the firewall, it runs it through this worm management center. The moment it picks out these worms, then it's able to allow the good parts to go through, the bad parts remain here in within this worm management center. So you realize that managing viruses, handling this malware involves money. Not only do you need only antiviruses, but you also need these extra devices in which you need to have them installed on your network just to sift out the packets as they come through. Mobile code. Mobile code is very, these are small scripts, macros, or any other portable instructions. The most popular ones are JavaScripts, they're ActiveX, Visual Basic scripts. These are different mobile codes. And of course, you can be able to see them. You can, when you run them, you're able to see what is actively running on your machine. Even on your machine itself, there are some that cannot be detected by your antivirus. That's why we're saying that you go ahead now to use these forensic tools to quickly identify some of this mobile code, some of the extra viruses, to be able to disarm them. They work on different platforms and they're from different remote systems to a local system. They act as an agent for either worms, viruses, or Trojan horses. Mobile phones as well are always attacked. And by the way, you'll see that just the way we have different tools for computers, there are different tools that they use also for mobile forensics. There are different tools for mobile phones. From the moment any phone is involved in any kind of activity that is dubious and they want to do a forensic on it, yes, they're able to get all kinds of different forms of tools. Client-side vulnerabilities are very key to pick out on. These are usually driven, the client that is for me and you, the users on a network, usually driven by the downloads that we always pick out on. And that's where we said, watch out for those who are always downloading different programs, downloading pornography, downloading, many times installing games. Those are entry points in which these different vulnerabilities can attack an organization or even a network. Exploit the browser vulnerabilities. When a user visits a website that is controlled by hackers or compromised websites, there are those that they call the clickjacks, that they will quickly pick up and install themselves, just the way we saw like the cookies. They are not safe. They are installing themselves and installing viruses. and waiting to release some payload. The moment you go to that website, you're gone. Social engineering, spam and emails, Trojan horses, all these are tough ways in which people are able to pass on and get this malware. In social engineering, this is where they will just sweet talk you into releasing your password. Have you picked some not emails? Have you picked some phone calls from some buffet that are telling you you are lucky winner of something, but just press these codes. They'll give you some short codes. Before you know it, you go and check and you find that all your money has been transferred using those short codes. You're like, how did it happen? Then they'll tell at some point, enter your PIN. Well, the moment you start doing that, then you see that it becomes very, very tough for you to be able to detect and pick out on those viruses. So social engineering is not a good way of always sending. At the moment you hear someone telling you, and these days people are calling, it's very common. People are calling friends and colleagues and telling them, yes, you're lucky winner of this, or they tell you, you need to verify your number. Otherwise, from Thursday, tomorrow, Friday, you will not have access to your mobile money or to your whole number. It's going to be frozen. The moment they say that, tell them it's okay. I'm on my way to the MTN nearest store. They say, no, we can do it for you here. I say, no, I know where I'm going to. Have a good day. Sometimes tell them off. We know you're fraudsters. I've learned because over time you get to see the numbers and you pick their pattern of talk. So, and some of these keep detecting the amount of money you have on your account, on your number. So what happens in such a case? Send those numbers to MTN mobile, the helpline. And I'm telling you, they trace them, they always block those numbers. So I've learned to tell them, we'll block your number, it will not be available. And immediately it goes. So always learn to see how to be always on the alert to get rid of all these antiviruses and Trojan horses. Spam, we've seen, this is much better now. It has much better protection now that you can always disable it. You can always get rid of it. Same applies to Trojan horses. They look like useful tools. You will install them. However, get to know they have a hidden kind of code and their focus is in destroying and doing harm to your network. Payload, this one we had described. These ones are it's the actual bullet. It carries the actual destruction. And usually the data is they always encrypt this data, that ransomware, what it's supposed to do. The focus is to damage a particular file or to carry out series of wrong activities. We have examples of some of this payload. We have the Starnex. This Starnex causes physical damage and also targets Siemens industrial control software. Especially Siemens, by the way, still produces hardware and software, mainly for lab, like MRIs, all those lab big equipment. They're usually by Siemens. They moved on from phones and smaller gadgets. They went now mainly in lab gadgets. And of course, they always carry logic bombs. The kind of impact of how big the ransomware is going to carry out damage is the payload. A little more about the payload and what the bots and zombies do. They're either bots or drones or zombies. These are programs that take over other computers to launch different attacks. Usually they use, or they're characterized by remote control facilities that distinguish different factors. The moment they get working together as a team, they now make what they term as a botnet. And like an internet, but of only those bots, a whole connection of them. You'll find I have about millions of computers. It's sending millions of attacks to one particular destination. And that's how they were able to pull down Facebook. But it took those attackers a long while to do that. Botnets are used for carrying out distributed denial of services. They are used for spamming. They're used for sniffing traffic. They're used for keylogging, spreading malware, installing advertisements on machines, manipulating games and different polls. That is what these bots are. They are little small dangerous agents that aim in passing on this payload to the different users. Look at the trends of where distributed denial of service attacks are. I remember asking, what are the common attacks in Uganda? As we are still getting those small viruses, we haven't yet reached the level of getting this distributed denial of services. But worldwide, Cisco carried out a study and they're procrastinating, or they were extrapolating it to see how far the distributed denial of services are going to be a big deal. They're saying even up to 2023, they were predicting into the future and showing that these are growing. And look at the amount of losses they were causing from 2018, $7.9 million US in terms of losses, 9.5, 10.8. Look at where now we are. And it's true, by the time they brought down Facebook, that was in 2021, they had carried out a lot of havoc. And I imagine the amount of loss is equally going to be added on. We'll be able to pick up the actual records and the amount of losses as well. So we see that these denial of services are on the increase. And that's why at any one time, you need these forensic tools to keep on detecting, to keep on understanding this code and even disarming them before they cause any further damages. Payload can also cause information theft. That's why we're saying we have credential theft, picking your username and password, keyloggers, spyware. Yes, for Uganda here, they told us that one of the most common vulnerabilities they pick up on are phishing mails or identity theft. Those are the most common viruses that they pick out on that help in distorting people's information. Spear phishing, these act as a trusted source of specific targets. They go for one particular target of interest. Payloads and rootkits, these are several of them. We gave you an example of some of those tools, the Sakuras and etc. There are several of those. And their focus is in generating their sets of programs that are installed for admin access, malicious and stealth changes to the host of operating systems. They may hide the existence, but their aim is that they always want to see how they can hide themselves and keep on manipulating and generating and propagating this malware from one place to another. So picking them up is very important. Here's an illustration of how these rootkits tables usually work. They usually work mainly with Unix machines, and they're able to get them attacked. Usually they attack the kernels, they attack the the kernels, yes, the after arc installments, and they go and destroy some useful parts within the operating system. We have some countermeasures for these. Always mention prevention, but the first is being able to even identify them and detect them. Once you detect this kind of rootkits, delete them, execute them outside, take them to the sandboxes and blow them up from there. They require lots of generality, timeliness in terms of you must be a very active person. Resilience, not giving up. You must be able to every time keep on checking to pick out on these updates. Then of course, there's also minimum deny of service costs. Those are part of the requirements. And of course, transparency is also there as well. Some of them are usually global, but there are also some locally covered attacks. We want to wind up the last bit quickly in malware analysis. Remember, we've already done some of this using Gregshot and using the hash values. And we want to see those two types of static and dynamic malware analysis. We have two fundamental approaches. We've said the static and dynamic analysis of this malicious software. In static, it involves analyzing the code or structure of the program to determine its functions without actually running it. While in dynamic, and by the way, we always ask you these key questions to describe any two techniques, or at least any one technique and what happens in it within section B of our final exam. So you need to be expectant of this kind of malware. Not only section B, sometimes even in section A, there are those small short questions that we can ask within a malware analysis. So for the dynamic or behavior analysis, these ones, yes, Amos, we shall discuss that later. Allow me to finish doing the teaching. Our dynamic analysis or behavior analysis involves running the malware and observing the behavior on how this malware runs on a system. So before running the malware safely, you must set up an environment that allows you to study this malware without damaging your system, just the way we mentioned, putting it off the network, taking time to run it in a particular interpreter environment such that it is safe. That is what dynamic analysis is, because these contain the behavior blockers. And we shall see that for them, these ones aim at focusing on targeting those very stealth, polymorphic, encapsulated, basically the concealed types of viruses and worms, as we have seen. So under the basic static analysis, this is typically to gather information on the malware. You use an antivirus. Basically, the static is for the small, simple type of viruses. Yes, we gave them two different types of viruses. The very initial ones are the ones that use this static one. I want to look quickly to recall its name. So these static viruses, static analysis is typically the typical techniques that gather information of malware. They use antivirus tools to confirm just the maliciousness. Okay, we use antivirus tools to confirm the maliciousness. They use antivirus tools to confirm this kind of maliciousness. They use the hashes, the hash values, to fingerprint this kind of malware, to unpack this malware, to gather information from its file strings, its functions, and its headers. Here we just do the basic scanning. We rely on the file signatures known for our suspicious code. We can do the pattern matching. We can also do the heuristics. These are very helpful. Okay, so we have these file signatures that will just scan for patterns. They will do the heuristic searches and try to pick out which ones are infected. So because of various antivirus programs, you find that the signatures can easily be picked. And of course, we've seen these are always updated on a daily or weekly basis. So these ones are for very simple viruses. They quickly help in scanning for the basic. They're giving us examples, like if you're using Total, or I don't know, Sophos, or using McAfee, whatever kind of antivirus that you use to do your scanning, that is just the basic kind of scanning. We then can also use the hash values. This one we saw and we use practically, and we will still be able to still do it again, because these are some of the ways in which we can quickly pick up on the different viruses and if the attacks have taken place. Malicious software is run through a hashing program that produces a unique hash or a fingerprint that identifies that malware. So that hash is regarded as a fingerprint. We use the MD5, which is the Message Digest Algorithm 5, or even the secure hash algorithm 1 to 160. These are the most common ways in picking up this hashing, which is one of the analyses of our static kind of malware analysis. This is an example of how the hashes run. And of course, we ran it using the hash values. You can also run it using, this is a Win MD5 free to help in running to see that hashing algorithm. You run it, get a number. Then you run it after some time and you see if the numbers are exactly the same. You compare, and if they are the same, when you click verify, it will give you the results. Then you'll know there's something happening and you're able to quickly pick up and see what you read the report. It will give you a report that you'll sit and analyze. These are still also examples of software that can quickly help us. This is McAfee that helps in doing this quick hash value analysis. The other one we have is the packed analysis under the basic static analysis. The packed malware analysis. These ones are a little bit more stringent. They go just beyond the viruses will bypass the firewall, and even the antivirus scanners and malware authors usually use this packing or the obfuscation of making some of these files very difficult to detect and to analyze. So the packers and the software will usually compress, and these ones focus on the encrypted viruses. They aim at decrypting them, and they will work so well to analyze it. They're giving us some software here, the UPX at sourceforge.net, that can help us to do this malware analysis. UPX is another free tool that can help us, just like the way we saw RegShot, as we will shortly be able to see. And so they will help in picking out this packed malware. So you'll notice that you not only need one way of analyzing, say, an antivirus. No, you go on to the next level, picking these behavior blockers, going ahead to pick those packed malware, because each of these antiviruses, or they have a special way in which they deal with these viruses. This is an example of the EPID that helps in doing these packer detectors. Again, it's open source software that you pick, install, and you run. You compare the values to see what kind of viruses are there and where they're located, where they're being executed. And you will be able to pick out on these tough ones that have bypassed. These ones usually bypass our firewall, and they are not easy to pick up on. That's why we are always detecting them ourselves. Shy Boy is asking, Atim, why are you re-registering yourself? These are our usernames. We have the string searches. String searches make use of strings that are executable and typically store the ASCII values, the characters, the Unicode formats in terms of bytes to analyze these strings. They search through the strings and they give us a simple way to get hints on the functionality of these viruses. For example, we can use tools like the Windows sys internal utilities like strings to give us this feedback about these string searches. They're giving us an example of what some of this software would do. It runs it and it will return back to you the different kinds of strings of viruses that you will need to go and delete or decrypt as well. We have portable executable files. The P is the portable executable files that are always moving around from place to place. And these ones are very quick and swift in every time you're loading your Windows. Have you ever run your operating system when you're starting your machine and you see it manipulating and getting you different black small screens? That shows you, I'm telling you, this is the one I have. Those portable executables, you totally see lots of various little black screens. Those are different kinds of viruses that one will need to detect as well. And of course, here they're telling us that these portable executables, you need to read them through their kind of headers in a secure environment to see in what kind of behavior, where are they being imported from, their time and dates. And of course, this can always be scanned because they are also strings as well. There are different types of malware. How do we deal with this? Yes, you need to get to their root and see how you can pick out on some of these executable items. Code libraries can be connected to this main executable code and see how to quickly get rid of it. Sometimes if they fail and they've gone very far into the operating systems, into the libraries, it's advisable to just do a real reinstallation. And of course, that takes a bit of time. And sometimes you just decide, if I live with them, as long as they don't slow down your machine, then you can always see how to isolate them with time. Here is a tool, a dependency worker that can help us to analyze such software quickly. So once we go and look for any dependency worker, for example, install it, it can be able to pick out on some of these viruses. You read their names and now you're able to get the actual antidote for that particular kind of virus. Another one is here where I use the MSDN online software that can help us in doing this malware analysis. And of course, I tell you, every time you're paying for, you wonder, Madam, where are we supposed to get some of these tools? Some of these, you actually pay for them as extra add-ons when you're buying an antivirus. When you're paying for an antivirus, they classify them into different categories. Are you buying just the basic? Are you just buying a different item? So that is what helps in telling you the capability of what you're paying for. The cheaper, the less the signatures. And of course, the less effective it is. They're just showing us illustrations of some of these portable files and the kind of metadata that they pick out on in the headers, such that you can easily analyze them and you're able to delete them. And again, you use forensics to do this extra work to be able to pick them up and get rid of them. Next, we have the dynamic analysis. Dynamic analysis goes to deal with using dedicated physical or virtual machines to analyze malware. These are used by preventing malware from spreading across an air-gapped network. You will be able to see some of these when we go to the Nook of NITA. They do a lot of this, and they have the virtual machines that are paid for in detecting over large sums of networks, and they're able to see this particular institution or this particular area now is having this kind of attack. They make a phone call, send an email, and see. The other static ones deal for individuals. These ones deal now with bigger networks. That's why you need to pay up for bigger virtual machines to give us better isolations of machines over the network that have been infected. The disadvantage, if you don't on an internet connection, of course, it's hard for us to pick them up. You need to be on an internet, on a network for us to pick them up. You can also be able to pay for some of these dynamic analysis from the internet service providers. For example, you can pay it if it's MTN, that's your internet service provider. They can offer these extra services at a cost. Okay, Ian is asking, is it like a command running itself as the desktop starts? You will see it, it's just a virtual machine is just like the program we said we install. That program, when it runs, it's able to give us some quick information on the details that it contains within there. Yes, so it keeps giving you, it keeps running, and it will give you an analysis and even the naming of the different kinds of viruses. We will be able to see just a few here. Let us see some of these. When you're using a virtual machine, you make sure that all service packs, all patches, all hot fixes, and applications are already installed such that you're up to date with your viruses. And of course, on the host of your network, it's where you're able to pick and notice where malware is going to. So they're telling us, look at the illustration below here. It's through your network adapter that you're able to pick up some of these, showing where you're actually picking these viruses from. So this is just at the preparation stage in the dynamic analysis. Then of course you find the different key tools that you need to use. For example, process monitors. If it's Microsoft, you need to have some process monitors that show the real-time file systems and the registry analysis. And that's why we shall see, we use tools like the RegShot, as we will shortly see, to help in this dynamic analysis. In these tools, look at some of them. We see that we have some of these process explorers that are able to give us some of these analysis. And of course, they will keep on running and showing us different tools that come, lots of feedbacks that come from scanning the registries of your systems. Yes, look at this one using a tool known as RegShot. We had seen it and we installed it. We said we go to Google, we go and pick up on this RegShot. It picks up and analyzes right from the root all the systems. That's why we said it's used in detection, it's used in malware analysis. You pick up, look at the output of, this is an example of how RegShot runs, as we had seen and done. You take the first shot, do the second shot, then you compare. Once you compare and it runs, it gives you an output when it's finished that looks like this second. Let me come quickly and annotate through and show you. Yes, this is the one, the RegShot that we are saying we look at. Then this is the kind of output of what you have. You take time to study these little lines of code. That is where you'll be able to understand and see from last night to today what we added. See, this one says 2 we added, what we modified 182. Take time to analyze them and see who had told them to, and where did they adjust themselves. This is what RegShot would help us to do in handling the dynamic malware analysis. At least we've looked at one of these tools. Okay, you can also have the APET DNS that can help us in doing this analysis. There are several tools that you can use in doing this dynamic analysis. You're not tied to only one. You pick out on those that you can easily use, and their focus is in detecting these particular tools. Wireshark is another open source sniffer that helps us to track our traffic over the network, to see what is happening, who is accessing what. Wireshark is one of those tools that we use as well to carry out our malware analysis. So you find that you can't use only one tool. There are several multiple tools that you would want to use just to find out and see who is sniffing over your network, and to give you real-time feedback on that kind of thing. Next is the practical step. Once you have done your baseline, before executing the malware, we take the first snapshot. You remember of the registry using regshot? Then you're able to track and see if there were any processes, any changes that were made. Make a second regshot and then be able to do the analysis. So the second one, do our regshot that captures our baseline, do the system status using different tools. We've seen the monitor and the process explorer tools that you can use. Then also do the network trafficking using the APET, DNS, or Wireshark to track our different network traffics. Then do the comparison. Regshot has a good one for a comparison of the snapshots, just to see what has changed, this one will pick out those that have actively been added, deleted, and those that are actually actively running. And of course, here they're reminding us that in operations of antiviruses, antivirus programs have two basic modes. There's the static mode, there's also the dynamic file scanning. Again, these depend on what you've paid for. Scanning them is important, but time reaches where you need to use some extra forensic tools to go ahead and deal with this malware, as we have seen. Once you're able to identify them, you can quarantine them and later on see how to delete some of these simple files. Okay, so class, in summary, we've been able to see a number of malicious software. We defined them. We looked at different basic definitions. We looked at different types of viruses, worms, Trojan horses, rootkits. We wound up by looking at our static and dynamic analysis. Thank you very much. Friday, please, we will not be able to cover, Friday will not be able to have our, at 2 p.m. we will not be able to have our face-to-face session in the labs. Please use that time to still revise. I would want to find out from us, when are we having, when would you suggest that we have our test? Let me first help and ask people to unmute, or even be able to suggest in the chat room here, when do you think we can be able to have our tests? I'm not hearing. Ronald is suggesting Sunday. What time on Sunday are you suggesting?
The other week.
Okay, Sunday the other week.
Not maybe.
No, it can't be. It can't be Sunday. Some other day, not Sunday. Sunday we have to go to church. We have to organize stuff. We have a lot of stuff on Sunday.
Okay, so can we make use of it on the next Wednesday, within our session 5 to 7?
We have a paper.
Pardon?
We have a test next Wednesday. Let's do the other week.
Let's do it on Monday.
Give a particular day. Pardon?
Saturday.
Not this Saturday, but the next Saturday.
Choose Tuesday next week. Tuesday next week we are free.
Madam, on Saturday.
You on Saturday.
Next
This
Saturday.
Saturday.
This Saturday, madam.
This Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
This
So next Saturday,
Saturday.
we'll be able
Yes.
to get at least 2 hours, 9 to 11. Not this, you
Yes.
want this Saturday?
Yes, madam.
Oh,
No, not this Saturday.
Next
Next week on
Saturday.
not this week. Not this
Madam, this
week.
Saturday.
okay.
Next Saturday.
Next week on Saturday.
No problem. Okay, I've picked it very well that next week on Saturday.
Yes,
So maybe
madam.
we can start earlier. We can come by 8 so that we finish by 10.
Which test is that for 2 hours?
Which test is that for 2
So what is
hours?
the final day?
What's the scope?
No, it's the next Saturday.
Then what's the scope?
All that we've been able to
What is
cover.
the final?
I saw, but it's Ronnie, you're not ready. You have to do the test.
Okay, class, have yourselves a good day and thank you so much for logging
Now
in.
I need to confirm with that.
Four chapters.